Impeachment, Censorship, and China Puff Pieces. I'm Kel Kidman, and this is Breaking on the Daily. Now, let's get into it. Because we have impeachment. And this is the second impeachment of Donald Trump, which is, I expect it to pass the House, maybe with a few Republicans that are going to be primaried in 2 years, some of them supportive of it. I expect a little bit, but, man, it's really worthless. I mean, seriously, he's going to be gone in a few days anyway, in the totally Hong Kong, completely fair election, because of that. But seriously, it is just entirely ridiculous what has been going on with this impeachment, and I haven't been covering it that much, because honestly, it's not that important. But this is something I actually did want to cover. Because Pelosi has now named the impeachment managers and has faced criticism for certain choices. Because, well, they're predictably hilarious. One of my favorites being Eric Swalwell is in there currently. Yeah, the guy who quite literally screwed the pooch, Eric Swalwell, is running the impeachment. Along with some others who I wouldn't exactly put as the bipartisan unity party type of thing. I mean, first of all, they're all Democrats. Despite the fact that certain Republicans, once again, who are going to be primaried in a few years, have come out to support this measure, despite the fact it doesn't make sense. It really is just... It's just a measure in absolute futility and absolute spite, might I say. Don't let anyone say Democrats are the party of unity, because any unity that is wrought within a party that is so vindictive as to go after someone as they're on their way out peacefully and completely misconstruing their every word to say they're inciting violence. They're not unity. That unity, though it may be unity in some definition, it is utterly worthless to anyone who actually wants to accomplish anything of worth. Because this is a mistake that a lot of people make, and that is the idea that unity is inherently valuable. It isn't. It is not inherently valuable to be at unity, or, in a certain sense at peace with anyone, or anything. Unless there is some sort of benefit to being at peace, well, why should you be at peace? Peace itself is not an inherent value, as is portrayed by a lot of people. And for those who are going to shoot back, but you're Christian, Jesus flipped tables in the temple, man. Jesus, though the Prince of Peace, I would say is not someone who is opposed to violence on all fronts, in all scenarios, at all times. At least I wouldn't interpret it that way. Anyway, it's getting off into the weeds. I got off into the weeds pretty heavily there. But that's not... this isn't the only thing that Democrats are doing, because they're also trying to go after the 25th Amendment and trying to get Pence to make Trump resign. Another ridiculous thing, because there's no evidence to suggest that Trump is at all lacking in terms of his mental function, which is what the 25th Amendment is, for the most part, there to do and prevent from happening. Though it will be quite funny to see in a couple of years when they use the 25th Amendment against Biden, because it seems quite inevitable. I mean, first of all, for those who will say, oh no, that's not going to happen, just look at Kamala Harris's personality. Because regardless of whether Joe Biden is actually Alzheimer's, and I think he is, honestly, or at least at the early stages of being such, which, for the record, since Alzheimer's is quite a fast-moving disease, in a couple of years it's going to be way worse than it is now. But that's beyond what has been said a million times. Kamala Harris is a calculating individual. I wouldn't say calculating, but a shrewd and ruthless individual. Kamala Harris is all out to try and get as high a position as she can garner with anything. And she will take advantage of people and then stab them in the back the second that they're not useful to her. The way she got into politics in the first place was through using someone high up in California politics. I forget the name at this juncture and the exact position. And through that, she became DA. And as soon as she did, And it turns out, this guy's a bit corrupt. She starts going after him like a hawk, almost instantaneously. And this is the story of her being promiscuous, let's say, with this person. So don't be surprised when, in a couple years, Kamala Harris starts backstabbing Biden. Because Biden is only useful to her as long as she gets the vice presidency seat. And I think in her mind, eventually the presidential seat. Of course, if she tries to use the 25th Amendment against Biden, in all likelihood what will end up happening is she'll get impeached. It would be an interesting thing. I think there's a lot of potentialities. And her being impeached and removed from office, to be clear, is one of those potentials. And I don't think she'd ever resign. For the record, I don't think that Kamala Harris would ever resign. That's just, I don't think it's not in her. I think it's not in her character. But people have been calling for the 25th Amendment. Once again, I keep getting off in the weeds. Because I just have so many things to talk about with regard to this sort of stuff. Despite the fact that it's so annoying. But Pence has rejected the calls for the 25th Amendment. And they're actually, I think the House voted for it and voted yay on it. Because Democrats currently control the House. And not for much longer, might I say. But he has rejected calls for the 25th Amendment. It means it's essentially going nowhere. And I don't know what people expected. This is going to go exactly the same way, or almost exactly the same way, that impeachment went back in 2019. And yeah, you're seeing all of the reports of, all of these Republicans are going to support impeachment, are going to try and convict, and Mitch McConnell is going to support it. If Mitch McConnell has any political sense, and I do think he does, he will realize quite quickly here that that is not a advantageous thing for him to do. And the reason being is that through all this, first of all, Donald Trump's YouTube channel has been blocked. And this is on top of all of the sort of things that have been happening to Donald Trump and his supporters throughout this whole thing. Censorship has really ramped up, and it's looking as though a lot of people on the right are very, very black-pilled on a lot of this stuff, especially after Parler got taken off the internet because of Amazon. And for the record, the reason that Parler is still in my videos, the reason that I still have the Parler logo there and I haven't replaced it with something like Minds or something, is because I fully expect it to come back. And once it does come back, I will go back to doing exactly what I was doing on Parler beforehand. I fully expect that to happen. I don't think this will kill them. It didn't kill Gab back 3 years ago. I mean, and people are pretending as though this is some new thing that has never happened before. It has. It has. And expect it to happen again. But the mistake that people run into when it comes to things like censorship is that they think that everything will stay the same or keep going on the same trajectory forever. And people have this problem both when it comes to things going well and things going bad. So you have the white pills, and I would put myself in more of that category, who are prone to believing that things are going well, or when things are going well, that they will continue to go well. But the black pills have the same problem where if they see something going badly, they'll continue to think it's going to go badly for the rest of all time. And it leads you to... I will say that black pills are much more dangerous because white pills will continue to fight. And white pills are all about looking for the silver lining in things and trying to find a way to fight back. And of course, I do believe I fall into that category. And, there's a reason for that, which is why I believe... which is why I believe it's better. Black pills, on the other hand, are a bit dangerous. And the reason they're dangerous is because they lead you into areas of thought that don't improve yourself, that don't help you to actually get your life together and actually help you become a better person in a lot of senses. Because black pill, and the autonomy of a black pill, is inherently the belief that there is nothing to be done, that all hope is lost. That's what blackpilling is. It goes beyond mere cynicism and goes into much, much worse territory. And that's kind of the autonomy of blackpilling. But all of this sort of stuff, all of this, isn't going to work. And it especially is not going to work long term. Because... and this is the next story we have. Key voters have little appetite for this stuff. They have little appetite for impeachment, and they fear big tech censorship, according to an internal memo. This is saying that 60% of battleground voters view the Democrats' latest efforts to impeach Donald Trump as another waste of time and money, and are seeking orderly transition power, which they are going to get from Trump. I mean, he has essentially conceded at this point, though I would say that I do actually really like a statement in that he didn't he didn't say he lost in a free and fair election. Honk honk. He was insinuating in a quite good way how all of that went down. Now, this is reported from a memo from pollster John McLaughlin's to a top Trump aide, Jason Miller. This was the Washington Examiner voting. Battleground voters are more eager for the nation to move on rather than impeach the president for last week's violent protest by pro-Trump supporters in the U.S. Capitol. If Congress doesn't move on, adds the two-page memo shown below in full, those who push impeachment may face a voter backlash of the 2022 midterm elections. And this is why I've been talking about how all of these Republicans who are going on to support impeachment are going to be primaried in 2022. There is no political ground to be had with this impeachment. It's even less than what happened at the latter end of 2019, where Donald Trump got impeached for similarly completely ridiculous grounds as he is being impeached for now. I mean, we could go into how he didn't incite anything, and if anything, what his speeches did, and especially the speeches after the fact that got banned from Twitter for inciting violence. Yeah, really, Twitter? They were supposed to incite violence? Let's be honest. If anyone who has read this transcript or seen the videos knows for a fact, and even if they don't say it, that speech, all of those things that were said, were more likely to incite a hippie love bomb than a riot, or any sort of violence of that sort. He was talking all hippy-dippy about how, oh, we need to be peaceful, all of you go home, all of that sort of stuff. That's what he was saying, all right? He was trying to get people off of it. And to imply that the word fight in all contexts means violence is simple ignorance of language. I cannot fathom how these people who would readily use fight in a context to mean struggle, or to mean we're going to fight for our principles, we're going to continue to do this. That doesn't mean violence. No one would suggest it means violence if it wasn't to scoring their political opponents. No one would do that. Simply ridiculous. And yes, I understand a lot of leftism and a lot of modern left thought, and frankly, a lot of modern thought, and we don't even need to limit it to leftists, relies on a complete ignorance of definitions and a complete ignorance of historical reality and historical usage of terms. I do completely understand that. It's just, it never gets old. It really doesn't ever get old to see these people continue to gaslight you about the definitions of words. It's just, oh man, it does quite get annoying. But beyond all that, let's look at this from a more international perspective and look at the whole political situation from a more international perspective. Because the world does not stop simply because the U.S. has some political strife. China's economy, more specifically. The Wall Street Journal put out a puff piece. I couldn't describe it as anything else. They put out a propaganda article about how China's economy is doing so well. Oh my gosh. Look at all of these economic numbers that we're getting from China. Look at how much more GDP they have as compared to the rest of the world. You know, is China just a unicorn? Are they just able to do whatever they want? Are they able to avoid economic gravity? You know, are they able to avoid all of these problems that have come up from the world economy as of this last year? Are they really? Are you suggesting that China's magic or something? Wall Street Journal? No. They're lying about their numbers. Now, they've been lying about their numbers for years, decades. But it is infuriating to see people who are supposedly knowledgeable about economic numbers, economic reality, people who work for the Wall Street Journal, come out and just pretend as though nothing's wrong. Oh, China's numbers? Yeah, completely legit. You know what? China is in a very similar place that Russia was in the 60s, 50s and 60s, and even into the 70s. For those who don't know, Russia was a huge problem. All right, we pretend as though there was no legitimate issue, that no one was actually, looking at Russia and thinking they were going to take over the world, because we have the context of what happened in the 80s. We have the context of the fact that the Soviet Union collapsed under its own weight, and that eventually, over time, the economic gravity caught up to them. The fact that they were lying about a lot of their economic numbers caught up to them. But we forget the first link in that chain, and that being the Soviet Union was lying about their economic numbers for years. They were lying about every single thing that was happening in their country for decades, up until they actually ended up crashing. And China is in a very similar position, in that they are lying about their numbers to prop themselves up, to look as though they are the biggest power, like they're going to continue to storm the world for the rest of all time. It's not going to happen. All right? China, eventually, their economic gravity will catch up to them, because regardless of all of the surrounding economic circumstances, whether they are the top spot or not, frankly, they're eventually going to fall. Eventually, their economic lies will catch up to them, like every lie that has ever existed. And they will fall. And they will fall disgracefully. It is remarkable. History repeats itself. And history is repeating itself within a six-decade time span of each other. We're seeing a repeat of the 60s and 70s right now with regard to the U.S. and its political position. And we're also seeing it with regard to China and the Soviet Union. Two different countries, but ones with very similar philosophies and very similar economic positions at the time. Russia was a big problem in the 60s. They were. People legitimately thought that Russia was going to take over the world at that point. Many people. And reasonably at that. Because you looked at their economic numbers from the time, what they were saying that was their economic numbers at the time, and they look great. They look impregnable. They look absolutely amazing. China's in a very similar position. And it is a disgrace that this Wall Street Journal article spends its time puffing up China's economy, talking about how we're going to be more reliant on China for growth in the future, and talking up China as though you need to go invest in China. If there's any lesson to be learned from last year, and if there's really, on the world stage, of course there are lessons to be learned personally, and there are lessons to be learned nationally and locally and statewide, but in terms of in an international perspective, if there's any lesson to be learned from last year, it is do not trust China. Do not invest in China. Anyone who does invest in China, anyone who does trust China's numbers, are fools. Are fools. You're not going to win anything by sitting around and saying, yeah, let's continue to invest in China. Let's continue to invest in their magical unicorn economy that didn't have any problems and was ignoring economic gravity for the last year. Yeah, let's just do that. That sounds like a good idea. That sounds like a wonderful idea. Utter insanity. Utter insanity. Jeez. Yeah, don't invest in China. Try to avoid buying China's products at all. And yeah, I'm not one to talk. I have, keyboard switches and whatever from China because I have hobbies that essentially only get manufactured in China or in carpetbag German companies. But even I'm trying to limit myself. Really, truly. I'm trying to limit how much I buy from China. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next few years with regard to China, because people are going to continue to puff them up and pretend like economic gravity doesn't exist. And these people who know economic gravity exists and that it is going to apply eventually to China. And they're just going to pretend like, oh no, it doesn't exist. They're just continuing to grow. And it should be telling that back in April I think it was. China's economic numbers got so bad that the only thing they could do to manipulate their numbers, and the best they could do, was stable. How do you think their economy actually looks? Their economy is probably terrible at this point. And yeah, I'm basing a lot of this on speculation, but to be frank, everything you talk about with regard to China and their economic situation is speculation, including taking their numbers for granted as rote. It's the equivalent. If anything, it's worse, because you know China's lying about their numbers. Everyone knows China's lying about their numbers. That's their forte. That's their modus operandi. That's what they do. Yeah, this article from the Wall Street Journal is really disgraceful. And man, I'm getting too mad. And this is a bit shorter than yesterday, I think. But that's where I'm going to have to leave you guys today. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm Kel Kidman. This has been Breaking on the Daily, and I'm out.